It worked enough to get him on the bus. So it did what a placebo is supposed to do. Yeah, and that is it's supposed to pass muster. It's supposed to get you to think that you just took medicine. Now, whether or not it's effective depends on whether or not there's actually medicine in there. In this case, there was not, and so it was not effective. But a placebo effect is a beneficial effect produced by a placebo drug or treatment that cannot be attributed to the properties of the placebo itself and must therefore be due to the patient's belief in that treatment. Right? So you get, and it's a way of getting a baseline understanding of medicine and its effect on the psyche of individuals. So, what is it called? The white coat? White coat syndrome. So, for those of you who don't know, that's when a person's blood pressure spikes just by being in the doctor's office. Right? It happens. So, I've gone it, and they're like, oh, we might have to put you on blood pressure medicine. Just do me a favor, take your blood pressure at home for like a week or two, and just send me those numbers. So I did. All my blood pressures were normal, but when I go into the doctor's office, they were not. They were elevated. So they actually made me bring in my blood pressure machine, take my blood pressure there. The numbers came out the same. They said, okay, you have white coat. And it was like, oh, okay. Well, that's good, so I don't have to be on medicine. It's bad because that means that I'm terrified of you. So, a lot of needles over the years. But anyway, so that's not obviously a beneficial effect, but that's kind of along the same line, right? So a person will respond just based on the fact that they've taken medicine. It's just a question in what way. What way will they respond? So getting a sense of what a baseline reaction is to a particular medication is important. So you have the placebo effect, you get a metric for that, and then you can compare what the true change is based on an experimental drug or the real drug, your Tylenol, for example. Did the Tylenol make the person feel better, or did they just feel better pain-wise, for example? Because, I mean, temperature is temperature. You know, if you got a fever, you got a fever. You know? But if you're saying, I have aches and pains, sometimes a psychological change could make the aches and pains go away. Right? So if you determine what the level of change in pain is based off of the placebo effect, and then determine what the change of pain would be based off of the actual use of real medication, then you could make a determination of how effective the medication is. Because sometimes it turns out that the medication is no more effective than the person's belief in the medication. Right? And so, and that's mostly for anything that's subjective. So you're talking things like pain more than anything else. Because a person's definition of pain is often different from someone else's definition of pain. Two people walk into a doctor's office with the same exact injury. One's at a level 9 and the other's at a level 2. They're both feeling the exact same thing. It's just one person feels it in their mind differently, right? Their level of tolerance. Me personally, pain, not a big deal. I mean, I live with it every day. But itching. I get a mosquito bite, I want to tear it right off. Like, the one thing I can't tolerate is an itch. So if a mosquito bite, poison ivy, whatever, like psychologically, I think that's my big bugaboo. Like, I just can't get past it. It's just debilitating for me. So I'm like clawing at myself. I'd rather experience the pain than the itch. And then there are people that are like, oh, I have 7 mosquito bites on my arm. You win some, you lose some. And then they get a hangnail. They're like, the pain! So, everybody's a little different in that regard. Obviously very important. Hawthorne effect is similar enough to be confused, but this is the alteration of behavior by subjects due to the fact that they're being observed. Right? So, that's more of a, if you go with one as being psychological, the other would be like more sociological. So the classic example is the music in the factory worker environment. Like every textbook you see, they all have the same example. it's like a bunch of workers at a factory are doing their job on Monday. Tuesday, the boss decides to run an experiment by varying the type of music played throughout the day. And productivity throughout the day increased. I think I even have one of those examples in here somewhere. What happened? Well, it was an example of a Hawthorne effect because the music didn't all of a sudden make the workers manufacture whatever they were manufacturing better. Like, it didn't give them more expertise just because they were listening to rock and roll or country music or rap or whatever. You know, it was just they knew they were being observed. Now, it is possible they had a little bit more bounce in their step, in which case, you know, you get the music that you like, you're a little bit more positive-minded, so maybe you get a little bit more production out of yourself that way. But it's not the kind of thing that's going to give you more knowledge, right? So what the conclusion is that the Hawthorne effect is at work because individuals know that they're being observed, so they're like, I better mind my P's and Q's because the boss is watching, you know. So that's a little bit of a different story because in both cases, placebo and Hawthorne, there is a beneficial effect. It's just one is an uncontrollable psychological effect. The other is more of an intentional effect. And also, I mean, it could be unintentional. It just happens. But it's more related to a person's behavior rather than some underlying psychological relationship. All right. So how do we handle these sorts of things? Blinding is the way to go for a placebo. If you want to avoid any kind of intentional changes, then blinding is the way to go. Subject does not know if he or she is receiving a treatment or a placebo. So the placebo effect is always going to be there. A person gets a drug, you're taking a pill, whether it's the real one or the placebo, you know that you're taking a pill. Psychologically, that's going to have some kind of impact. All right, so you just don't want to be introducing the Hawthorne effect on top of that. All right, so even with medicine, that could come into play. I think I'm supposed to be getting better. The doctor just gave me some painkillers. I am experiencing less pain. All right, so it takes away the sociological component and just leaves the baseline psychological component. All right, so person doesn't know real drug or fake drug, so the best they can do based on their own perception is give an honest opinion, because they can't say, well, I got the fake one, so yeah, I didn't get any better. I got the real one, so I got better. You know, there's the uncertainty there, so they don't have any idea. All right. Double blinding is where the administrator of the medicine doesn't know either. That would happen if that person is also collecting data, you know, some behavior-related data. So if they're trying to take note of whether, you know, like they may be just looking to see, does the person look like they're getting better? Does it look like they're moving around with less pain? Right? If you're going with pain, it could be something like antidepressants or things like that, where you're just kind of rating them on a different sort of scale. But you know, there is a subconscious component there. You know, a person got a placebo, so well, did they get better? Well, of course they didn't. They have a placebo. So we blind the administrator. So the way that would look, and there's a diagram here, but you would number some medicine cups. You know, those little cups with the pills in them. So you put a number one. That goes to Johnny. Number two goes to Mary, whatever. The person, the researcher, keeps note of whether the real drug or the placebo is going into those cups. The administrator is just somebody hired to administer the drug and take notes. And that's it. They don't know who's getting what. Right? But the person that's running the whole thing does know. Oh, yeah. Fun fact, I didn't make this diagram myself. I got it from here. So. Couple more terms, and we'll take 5. Exploratory data analysis, no prior expectations. I think that's probably pretty obvious. when people are doing projects for this course, it tends more so to fall in this realm than anything else. I mean, oftentimes people have a preconceived notion of what it is they're trying to discover, but they're not married to that preconceived notion. They're like, I think this is probably what it is, but it could very well be 10 other things. So this is what drew my interest to this idea. So, or my attention to this idea. So it's really more of an exploration than anything else. You don't have any particular result in mind. Formal statistical inference, specific questions you'd like answers to. You want to do this with a reasonable degree of certainty. We'll learn techniques for that down the line, but that's where you have a sense of what the outcome is, and you're trying to prove it or disprove it. That usually happens when there's some long-standing or preconceived notion that's actually the standard, the status quo, the belief system that is in existence, and generally you're trying to disprove that, or sometimes reinforce it, right? But maybe there's a policy in place that you don't agree with, and you have some data that says that law is outdated. That shouldn't be there. Times have changed. I have data to support this. I'm going to run a statistical analysis and prove it. Right? That's what that's for. Sampling errors that result in the survey process. Non-responsive individuals. I mean, that happens all the time. Anytime that somebody calls you up at dinner time, says, hey, are you available to answer a few questions? And you say, no, I'm eating, click. Well, yeah, that's the non-responsive individuals that were selected. They selected you and you said no. Right? That's your right. They take that chance anytime they pick up the phone. But the more important one for our purposes are inaccurate responses. You generally just toss those. If you were to say, because I mean, live witness news is a really good thing to look at on YouTube. What show is that from? The Tonight Show? I forget. I think it's Jimmy. It is Jimmy Fallon. Live witness news is really hilarious, but like they'll poll people individually on the street. They'll just go up to them and ask them questions. And one of them was, can you identify the location of China? And people would point to like Nova Scotia and like Brazil and like anywhere but China. It was hilarious. But so those would be cases of inaccurate responses. If that's actually the point of your study, then it's an accurate response of stupidity. But if it's a case of, you ask them what they think about the current policy related to agriculture in China, they answer the question, and then you ask them to identify the location of China on the map, and they point to Chicago, then you can say, all right, I am not going to include your answer to the question on agriculture in China because you just made that up because you don't even know where China is. Right? So, poorly worded questions happens to me all the time. I think I asked a question in a very profound and meaningful way. And then during the test, somebody raised their hand and said, I don't know what the hell you're asking me in question 7. Can you rephrase this? I'm like, oh, I thought it was a great question. Then I read it again. Oh, I missed like 4 really important words. All right, yeah, so poorly worded questions. I mean, every time I give you a test, it's a survey. It's a survey with points and stuff. So, yeah, but when you create a question, it might sound in your mind like a very powerful and meaningful question, but it may sound like utter nonsense to everyone else. So having a sounding board is pretty important. And bias in the selection of survey individuals. That's the most important one. I don't know if I have this example typed in here anywhere, but the one I like to use is smoking on campus. So student A comes into class and says, I think that smoking should be allowed on campus. How do you know? Well, I polled a random selection of 20 people, and they all agree with me. I was like, all right, what were the circumstances of your poll? Well, I was standing outside the front door, smoking a cigarette, and all the people who came up to me, I asked them if they agreed that smoking was all right. And they said, yeah. I'm like, okay. Well, there's an obvious issue there. Now, it may be the case that the overwhelming majority believes that smoking on campus is perfectly all right. But that individual sample is corrupt because they only selected people who were I'll just even go simple, at that location. All right? So if we're dealing with that particular location at that particular time, there's automatic bias. Why were they at that location at that particular time? Bias doesn't mean anything related necessarily to race, religion, or anything like that. It means that randomness has been removed from the situation. If there is no element of randomness, there's automatically bias in a situation. All right. So the fact that they were at that particular location at that particular time automatically makes it a bias. Right. Now, add to that the fact that a person has a cigarette hanging out of their mouth while talking to other people, asking their opinions. Now, whether or not they're all sitting there smoking together, that's irrelevant. I would ask you something like let's say I have a poll and I'm saying, I think that Avengers is better than Justice League, and I'm wearing an Avengers t-shirt. You don't have to know what those two things are. You just have to know that I am wearing an Avengers t-shirt. And I say, which one is better, Avengers or Justice League? There's automatic bias there because I have influenced the outcome. I'm wearing an Avengers t-shirt. Now, there's a possibility that they just say Avengers because they're people pleasers. And they want to tell me the answer that they think I want to hear. There's also the possibility that they're subconsciously influenced by the t-shirt that I'm wearing. All right? It's also possible that they don't have any idea what the two things are, but they see the word Avengers on my t-shirt. They're like, well, I see an example of something that says Avengers. I don't see anything that says Justice League anywhere. I'll just go with that. Right? So all of these things lead to bias, and they all will destroy your study and make it completely invalid. Right? The non-sampling error, that's incorrect collection of the data. That's usually not bad. I mean, it sounds like that would be worse. You know, like you made some human error. But that's a case like you ask somebody their age, and they tell you 19 and you wrote down 91. They're like, that's like raw human error. That happens anyway. The sampling error, that's a fundamental flaw in your study. That's a conceptual error that is undermining your entire analysis. Your study is invalid if you screw this up. Here, you just got to figure out where you made the mistake. You're talking about teenagers, and you got a 91 in there. It's not going to take too long before you figure out what went wrong, right? But sampling error, end of the world, as it applies to your study. Anecdotal evidence, that was I mean, I've been alluding to that for a while. That's the case of, I mean, you could read it, but I think everybody likes Avengers. Why? Because I talked to 10 people, and they all said they liked Avengers. All right, I didn't really go out of my way to get a meaningful representative sample. I just talked to 10 people I know. All right, that doesn't tell me anything. Available data, that's obvious. The random samples, we'll get to that in a few minutes, but we'll take a break now because this is a little chunky. It's also